That's a lot of damage!
Want big damage like that? I'll show you how to do it, then jump into a build for you to use. This exotic gauntlet, Athrys Embrace, boosts your damage with the weighted throwing knife, specifically after some precision hits. But I'm going to show you how much damage you could do with this thing. A regular throwing knife on its own does about 40,000 on crit. These numbers can get really confusing, so I'm also going to provide these numbers as a percentage. Let's say this is 100%. With a knife empowered by Athrys Embrace, the knife does close to 120,000, equivalent to almost 300%. The weighted throwing knife actually adds an ignition if it hits a scorched target. The ignition from my testing does around 43,000, so approximately 108% in addition to the knife hit itself. This damage is the same whether the knife was empowered or not. But we can go even further. Using a shotgun with 1-2 punch, we can boost our empowered knife's damage up to 238,000, around 600%. Adding an ignition on top kills Carl, so unfortunately we don't see the numbers for this, but if our previous numbers were anything to go by, it should be another 43,000. From these numbers, we can see that the ignition damage pales in comparison to the power of a 1-2 punch shotgun. However, proccing 1-2 punch requires getting really close to enemies, so in some scenarios, the ignition might be the best way to increase your damage. On to the build now, and first we'll talk about what to do with your subclass. Aside from taking Gambler's Dodge to get your knife back when, and not if, when your knife misses, aside from that, everything else is fairly up to you. In terms of aspects, knockdown is mandatory for using our weighted knives more often since we get them back on knife kills. We're going to introduce a fragment to make that play into that as well. For your second aspect, consider giving Gunpowder Gamble a try. Ability kills actually count a lot towards building up your Gunpowder Gamble grenade, so you actually get these grenades more often. For your first fragment, take Ember of Torches. Combining this with Knock 'em Down means on every throwing knife kill, you'll get your melee back. In other words, you get another knife back. The other fragments are much more personal preference. I use Resolve to add some cure to both my regular grenade and my Gunpowder Gamble grenade, so kind of double dipping into the cure effect here. The grenade I prefer using fusion grenades. It adds a little bit of Scorch on top, so Ember of Searing will make those scorched targets drop fire sprites. And then I'm going to round that off with Ember of Mercy so that picking up a fire sprite grants restoration, so it gives some healing to this build. Your mods should look something like this. I personally wouldn't sweat too much of the specific details, but I just want to give you the direction of where these mods are going. These mods are geared mostly towards class and grenade ability uptime. Class ability uptime is really nice because Gambler's Dodge is basically giving our knife back in case we ever miss. And grenade uptime is just really fun, so that's why I spec'd a lot into it, but as a result, you're using a lot of abilities with this mod setup. For weapons, a 1-2 punch shotgun is a must to crank up your damage. Your heavy weapon is adjustable to whatever activity you're doing, but for your final weapon, I personally like having a weapon that freezes the tanky targets for me so that I can set up the perfect knife throw. So I prefer using either a Riptide with Chill Clip on it, or Wicked Implement, which will freeze enemies from afar. Hey guys, this was not originally part of my script, but I do realize there's a nice little tip with the throwing knife that could be useful to you guys if you want to land your hits. So trying to throw your knife head on at a target sometimes means that you'll miss your target. But what I found that it helps kind of hit the knife a little bit better is because the knife actually bounces with this, you can do this. And it'll bounce into a target. That could be really useful. Alternatively, you can try throwing behind a target. And that eventually works somehow. I don't know why, but yeah, sometimes just be prepared. Sometimes you'll try to miss and you'll end up hitting somehow. So yeah, I find this to be very helpful, just to like jump up in the air, shoot towards the ground a little bit, and this way you'll be able to bounce into them. I feel like that increases the consistency of it just a little bit. And there you have it. With this build, you become an unstoppable knife-throwing hunter. Get it? Because this gauntlet also makes your knife stun unstoppable champion.